So you work around the shop and the dust is getting a little out of control and you realize you need something for dust control. Going in the house, it's getting in your lungs, but you just don't know what to do. There's too many choices. Do you need one of these, something like this, or just a shop vac like one of these, or maybe you need something like this. So many options. What's the right choice? Well, we're going to cover that right now, teach you everything you need, why you need it, and how to use it. So stay tuned. We're going to cover that right now. Hey, welcome back to the Woodcrafting Place. Ray Ruthin here. Welcome. It's the first time you're joining us. Glad you're with us today. So we're talking about filtration and dust control today. This is an extremely important topic. I'm going to emphasize, if there's only one video that you watch to the end, this is going to be that one. It's going to be some extremely important information about the hazards you'll encounter, how to control them, and what you can do to protect yourself. That way you will enjoy your time in the shop, which is what we're all about here. We're here to bring you woodworking knowledge to make your time in the shop more effective and help you enjoy it more. So if you like the information in this video and provide you with knowledge to help you out, make sure you smash the thumb. And don't forget to click on the like, subscribe, and hit that bell. That way you get notified of all the content we release weekly. So you probably know this already, but woodworking generates a lot of fine dust. Most people seem to believe that it's only the really super fine microscopic particles that are a hazard, and larger particles, the big dust that a saw generates, aren't a problem. They're not bad for your health. But unfortunately, that's not entirely true. Let me put this in perspective for you. OSHA has a requirement that in the workplace, you should only be exposed to 15 milligrams per cubic meter of fine dust. I wonder how much that is. That's about a dime-sized pile of fine dust in an 8-hour period. And that's not a lot of dust. Now if you're working in your own basement or your own little workshop and you're not an industrial concern with employees, you may not be worried about OSHA knocking on your door, but there's a reason that they've put levels down at that low of a level. Dust really comes in two classifications, right? There's different, and it's classified by size, and that will help you understand the risk. There's inhalable dust, and that is dust particles that are less than 100 microns. And then there is respirable dust. That is sanding dust down below 4 microns. The inhalable dust, as you take it into your system, the larger particles, depending on the size, get trapped in your upper respiratory area. And the smaller particles are able to get past all the cilia in your respiratory system, all the way down deep into your lungs. And if they're down below, say, like a half a micron, those can be filtered out into your bloodstream. So if you look at the chart that we have up on the screen now, you can sort of get some perspective on how it works. The inhalable dust you see goes to the upper respiratory system, as I said, and then there's a respirable dust that goes farther into your lungs. And the diagram shows you particle size, how they compare. Again, the human hair, the big long fat thing in the middle of the diagram, as compared to the smaller particles. And what you need to know about sawdust. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in 2002 classified sawdust as a human carcinogen. That's right, carcinogen. So it's not just sawdust anymore. It's not just the dust that got on your nose that made you sneeze. And it's not because just the dust, because the wood, which came from a tree, has all the toxins, the materials, the fluids, the chemicals, everything else that it was ever exposed to have been absorbed into the wood and are contained in there, whether it be treatments, finishes, paints. It's all in the sawdust. The sawdust has all of that. So when you breathe that sawdust, you're breathing whatever toxins and hazards are inside the wood. So if the trees came from a commercial growing area where there were a lot of fertilizers used, you're breathing in the fertilizer. One of the primary effects of sawdust is the inflammation of your alveoli inside your lungs, called hyposensitivity pneumonitis. Hard to say, but it can make you pretty sick. And of course, we can't get away from the conversation without talking about the big C, cancer. It's not just getting deep down to your lungs. The truth is, it's the larger particles, as I mentioned. It's not just the smaller particles, which get into the upper respiratory system. That's where most of the effect is. There's been sufficient evidence demonstrated through epidemiology studies that shows in the upper respiratory areas is where most of the exposure to sawdust happens, because that's most of the particles end up in your upper respiratory. So yes, the answer is, do you need something to control the dust? Absolutely. But unfortunately, we can't stop at your respiratory system, because wood also causes sensitivity. Yep, by working with sawdust, working with wood, the constant exposure can actually cause you to become sensitive to it. So you may have been working with wood for years and years and never had a problem, never bothered you, when all of a sudden you get a rash, or you get hives, or you get some kind of swelling. Well, once you have a sensitivity to a wood, a specific species, it'll get worse and worse, and you'll find that over time, the allergic type reaction from it may get so severe that you just can't work around that type of wood anymore. Recognize that by controlling the dust, you'll control your sensitivity. Check out the wooddatabase.com. I'll put a link down below. Great resource. You can look up hundreds of woods, commonly known woods. You work with maple, one of the most common woods today. You buy a big box store. And this can cause skin irritation, runny nose, asthma-like effects, has all kinds of possible sensitizing effects. So you'll want to know what it is that the material you're working with can cause. Let's talk about the 5 ways to control the dust and to make your shop more comfortable, more enjoyable, and safer. First one, simple. Eliminate it. Just simply find a process and material that eliminates sawdust and the dust cloud altogether. One of these ways is very simply wet sanding whenever you can. If you are sanding with a material that has some kind of finish already on it, it's stabilized, or it's been protected, or maybe it's a composite, man-made material, whenever possible, you want to wet sand. Wet sanding knocks the dust right down, prevents that from happening altogether. Substitution is the second one, right? Number 2, substitution. If you can find another material, like for instance a water-based finish rather than an oil-based finish, something that has a lot less vapor to affect your system, or a less hazardous wood. Engineering controls. These are finding ways to eliminate a process or eliminate a step that causes a lot of dust, such as buying pre-planed material to the finished thickness rather than planing it all yourself. Consider how much dust you can reduce if you just simply don't have to do the planing all by yourself. So, as we know, a planer puts out a tremendous amount of sawdust. So that's an example of an engineered solution. Your limit on being able to eliminate, substitute, and engineer the hazards out going to be limited. There are some ways, some things you just have to do what you have to do. The process is what it is. Cutting a 2x4 is cutting a 2x4. It is not a good way of doing it without sawdust. So in which case, you come down to the 2 protective final elements. You have point of generation dust control, in other words, a dust collector or a shop vac, and personal protective equipment, PPE, or, a respirator, some type of filtration system that even though there's sawdust there, you filter it from ever getting inside your system, inside your lungs. So you're going to be left with a combination of those 2, which is where most folks spend their time trying to figure out solutions. So, now let's talk about the first part of that, point of generation. This is generally getting some type of fixed or portable dust collection system that, with the use of some plumbing to the point of use, will actually remove dust once it's generated from coming into the breathing zone of the user, right? So if you have a shop vac, or if you have a large dust collection which has a port that sucks up the sawdust, that way it doesn't go into your breathing zone. It prevents you from actually breathing the dust and being affected by the hazard. Now, there's a bunch of different ways of doing this. The most efficient are backdraft and downdraft, downdraft being the best, and then backdraft, which pulls it away from the user, right? So if you look over my shoulder here, you can see right here, I have a fan, which has a couple filters. It has a MERV HEPA filter over and then a carbon filter over that. And that system actually is plumbed into a large fan, which then shoots it out through the flex hose out the window actually. So this is a version of what a backdraft unit would look like. That way when I'm spraying or doing something in the paint booth, it's ventilating, it's pulling away from me, out, and vents it all the way out of the shop to the outside. So I'm not as affected by any type of hazard. One way of eliminating a point of use generation minimization. If you've seen any of my previous videos, and we'll include a photograph here, a picture of our downdraft sanding table, we hook our dust collector up to a table with a series of holes in it so that it pulls all the dust down below. All of these are hooked up to, along with the plumbing, which you'll see, to a 2 horsepower dust collector. So, and these are the methods that I use, the standard methods of pulling dust away from the work area. So, and one more method of controlling dust is a ceiling mount dust collector. However, that's not useful for pulling dust away from the user's breathing zone. They're more tailored towards overall maintenance of the air quality inside the shop. It's over the course of hours will actually clear dust from the air in the shop to help keep it clean, and that just overall living health quality of the air in the shop. They're good, but they don't eliminate the hazard while you're actually processing the material. So let's talk about dust collectors. There's a common dust collector in the market. Harbor Freight sells it. It's 2 horsepower, right? And there's others just like it on the market. They all run about 1200 CFM is what they're rated for. And you're like, that's not too bad. 1200 CFM is a lot of CFM. And if I could get 1200 CFM at any working point, I'd be all set. I would never see dust in this shop. But unfortunately, that dust collector needs to be plumbed, and it needs to be plumbed down to a accessible plumbing size. We'll talk about that. But when you buy it from the store, that 2 horsepower dust collector, and like many of them, they come with a 5 micron filter built onto it. And the 5 micron filter does not help you filter out the level of dust that actually gets down deep into your lungs. Remember we said respirable is less than 4 microns. That size particle will actually go through the filter. The first thing you're going to want to do if you do go out and buy one of these dust collection systems is either verify or upgrade to make sure you've got a 1 micron or smaller filter system in it. I put a wind filter that I'll show you here on mine, and that does 2 things. Not only does it filter better, it also has much more filter surface area. That way it increases airflow from the original air filter, which was a big bag. Highly recommend it. Again, the links to where to find the wind filter will be down in the description. So when you're designing your dust collection, dust control, whatever method of dust control you're going to use, all right? The 2 key things to keep in mind, all right? The best kind of dust control is the kind that you'll actually use, right? It's got to be efficient, it's got to be convenient for the use, it's got to be effective, it has to work properly, all right? And it can't be so cumbersome or uncomfortable or whatever caused the work area to become so unpleasant because of the noise or whatever that you won't use it. So that's the first key rule. It's got to be something that you'll use for it to be effective. Second rule of dust control is if you can smell the dust or the hazard or the vapor or whatever it is, if you smell it, you're breathing it. So then you know that your dust control is only partially working or not working at all. and you need to do something to rectify that. So now we're going to talk about dust collector installation, all right? Again, keep in mind noise level. If you're going with a larger dust collector, you're going to want to focus on how to keep the noise down, because if your dust collector is too loud, so loud that it drives you out of the shop, you're never going to want to turn it on. So the dust collector that I showed you here puts out 95 decibels, right? And that's pretty loud. So you want to make, you saw that mine is enclosed in an insulated closet. I put normal standard pink insulation in between, 1/4 inch sheetrock. Cuts the noise way down. It makes the shop much more pleasant to work with. So you're also going to want to keep in mind your plumbing that goes along with your dust collection system. Now, I'm not going to go into extreme detail on how to plumb your dust collection system, but I'll give you some guidelines. There's a guy by the name of Bill Pence, and I put some links down below, and he has a calculator online that you can get the spreadsheet and go into great detail on exactly how you're going to plumb your dust collection system. So just the general rules. You want as much straight pipe as you can use, PVC or steel, whatever's more affordable or cost-effective or available at the time. Both are great. You want to use 45-degree turns rather than sharp 90-degree bends. It really strangles the airflow when you go around tight corners, and that will affect the CFM at your end point. You want to limit the amount of flex hose that you use. You do not want to use flex hose from your dust collector and go 20 feet across your shop. You will just really strangle your airflow down, and you make it start at 1200 CFM, but what you end up with will be a lot less. I found that flex hose in the calculations I ran literally restricted the airflow because it impacts the laminar flow through the pipe by twice what straight pipe does. And all these elements, these are all things you want to keep in mind. Obviously, as few turns as you can take are better, all right? Oh, yes, and of course, plumb your system so that you only have one open port, or one open tool, excuse me, being used at a time. So by having only one port open at a time and using blast gates everywhere, you'll be able to maintain the best CFM and have the best straight path to your end use, all right? So these are the things you want to keep in mind for your installation. So you'll see in some of what we show you here for the dust plumbing, you'll show you how I accomplished this, and you'll see a couple areas I need to improve on. Right? We decided to go with a 5-inch main duct. This was the largest duct size that could fit on the dust collector without any additional modifications. And you'll also notice that the bends that we've installed are 45-degree bends. This is critical so that you do not reduce or restrict your flow. Now you can see as we continue, the exception of the really bright lights, 45-degree angle junctions, including Ys, you can see here. And you can see one of our mistakes right here, where the flex hose, here you can see the flex hose comes off at a sharp 90-degree bend. 90-degree turn or rotation of the duct outlet, you can see what a nice gradual smooth arc I now have in the flex duct. And you can see how all of the junctions connect and how it branches off for every single machine. And then lastly, we have a blast gate. That way I can separate the machines. Now sizing the plumbing, as you'll see from that spreadsheet, if you go take a look at it, is a bit of a science. The basic rule is if you're going through a 4-inch, which is a common plumbing size for dust collection, right? From a 1200 CFM system through a 4-inch outlet, you're basically strangling your air down to about 400 CFM when you use that 4-inch plumbing. It's highly recommended for a 2-horsepower dust collector that puts out 1200 CFM. You want to get as close to a 6-inch main plumbing run as you can get. That way you can maintain as much of that flow and prevent any restriction from dust buildup inside the pipe. Now you'll see from the chart that we have here that there's various CFM requirements for your machines for your basic chip collection. Now, you're probably thinking, well, you told me that 4-inch plumbing on a 1200 CFM gives me 400 CFM right through it. So look at this chart. I'm pretty good, right? Well, this is just your basic large chip collection. What this doesn't account for is all that fine dust that we talked about earlier that's the real hazard to your health. So for certain tools like your table saw, your bandsaw, a radial arm saw, you're going to need 2 dust pickups to really get your fine dust under control. What happens is when you split your plumbing line into 2, so you split that 4-inch into 2 sources, you're going to knock that CFM way down. And once you include the right amount of dust collection that you need for fine dust, and there's just no way to accomplish that with the smaller plumbing, which leads us into really the next big subject. So you've maximized your dust collection system, and now what do you need to do next? Before we go into that, let me remind you, if this has been useful to you, if you're getting good information here, make sure you like and hit that thumb, right? And even if you don't make it all the way through this video, I know it's going to be a slightly longer video than most of my videos, save it or bookmark it to watch later. You're going to want to be reminded when we talk about filters in a little bit, what the personal respirators you need. That way you can come back and be reminded. So, and before we move into personal filters, let's talk about the role that your shop vac plays in all this, right? You've probably noticed I haven't said much about shop vacs. I'm sure you have this beautiful Craftsman or rigid shop vac, 6.5 horsepower. You're like, well, this thing should be able to suck air from across the room, right? Shop vacs have great suction and are able to pull a water table up like 36 inches, right? So that's a lot of suction. What they don't do is they don't move a large amount of CFM. Remember what we said. It's maximizing CFM. It's all it's about. It's not so much about suction and compression of the air that gives you the fine dust collection. So what you find is if you take your shop vac, you probably realized you need to pretty much put it right up to the dust or the wood chips for it to pick them up. Scoops them right up when you get near them, no problem. But if you have a small amount of dust that's this far from your shop vac, even with a nice, doesn't collect it. It just, because of all the competing air in the room, particles coming from all directions, and that small volume quickly gets dissipated through the ambient air, it's not capable of actually getting the surrounding dust cloud, which would be penetrating into your breathing zone and into your body. So the shop vac can work effectively as a secondary source of vacuum pickup, like on a bandsaw, for instance, where they have a bottom connection that's sized exactly with the 2.5 inches for your shop vac to hook up to. So you have a large pickup from your dust collection system up on top and the 4-inch dust hood, and then down below you put your shop vac as a secondary pickup. That way you have a much better chance of getting some more of that dust. The only time your shop vac can accomplish that goal, being your primary dust collection, is if you have a specialized hood. But those are the real limitations on a shop vac. So now you probably, if you're one of those guys that, like me, who built this nice cyclone dust device or accessory, so that when your shop vac sucks in whatever it picks up, it goes through a cyclone, drops all the particles into a bucket or something, and then sucks the air through the shop vac. You're like, well, that's way more efficient. Actually, it's not. Sorry, you might be a little controversial here, but every time you impact your airflow, it's resistance. You have a static pressure you have to overcome. So it is actually less efficient than just the shop vac with a really clean filter. That's as high and as good flow as you'll ever get from your shop vac. A nice, high quality HEPA filter. It's as good as it's going to get, and every time you put another attachment, accessory, or anything into the plumbing loop, you introduce a static pressure, and that way reduce your airflow. So, however, don't throw your cyclone attachment out, because what it does is it keeps all of the dust from making it to the filter. Your filter lasts way longer, so instead of the filter clogging quickly and your suction dropping way off quickly, right, you maintain less than optimal or less than completely perfect dust airflow through your shop vac. So they certainly are worthwhile to use, but for maximum airflow, there is just the best you get is just the shop vac. All right, so after you've maximized all your dust collection methods, well, then it's got time for our last bastion of safety, and that is a respirator, something to protect you, personal protective equipment. So the two types, an air purifying filtering system or an air supplying respirator. You know, like a Scott pack that the firemen wear. They have air that pumps in through a hood, positive pressurizing the face mask. That way it keeps all of the hazard completely out of the breathing area. That may be a little extreme for most people's wood shop, but it's the first method, the air purifying method, that we'll spend most of the time talking about. So there's particulate masks, toxin masks like organics and acids, and there's combinations of them, right? So the key is you have to pay special attention to whatever the hazard is that you're dealing with. Not all filters work for all hazards, all right? So we have this as your basic paint, which as far as I'm concerned, if no protection or maybe worse, it gives you the illusion of protection when in fact you really get no protection at all. Matter of fact, I throw them away or use them for coffee filters. They probably would make good coffee filters. It's about all they're good for. So from there we go up to the real filtration. These are particulate filters, and they come in various levels of filtration, and that's what they're rated as, how much they filter and whether they're oil resistant. And these are all particulate filters. So this is an N95, which means it is not oil resistant, and it filters 95% of particles out. Okay, this is where you really start getting some real protection, right? So then it goes up to 99 and 100% protection. You can see this is actually a P100, which means it's highly oil resistant. P, oil proof, but not really. It's very oil resistant though. There's a rubber gasket around here and a valve, just like the 95 did. Any real respirator you're going to want to wear is going to have an exhaust valve. That way this stays against your face when you exhale and does not let contaminants in while you exhale. And you're like, well, that's 100%. It's P100, so if it's 100%, that's the one I want, right? Absolutely, go right to 100%. Whoa, slow down. 100% means it resists more inflow, right? Not only does it filter more, but it creates a bigger restriction, so it's harder to breathe through than the 95%. You actually will find that it actually is quite a bit harder to breathe through that. I don't use it all the time because I noticed I'm breathing pretty heavy when I'm using it. So if there's a lot of dust, a lot of contaminant, that's the route you want to go. And they come in various shapes. Here's another one, but you'll notice there's no rubber boot here, and that's really the big thing about the 95 versus the 100 is that rubber boot. So those are all disposable, and you can kind of bend them a little bit with the little metal which you form to your nose, but then you can go up to the reusable. Here's your basic RZ mask, which you can buy on the internet, and pretty comfortable. I use this a lot when I need to wear my face mask. Like when I'm on a lathe, I always wear a face mask on the lathe. That way it fits underneath the face mask, and I don't have to worry about wearing separate safety glasses, and I get showered with wood particles that means I can do both, wear my respirator and my face mask. I've also tried this one, which has become a pretty popular unit. So if you want a lightweight, well-fitting, good filter, and there'll be links to all these down below so that you can go find them up and make the right choice. Now, if you want the most complete filtration, a good unit with good airflow, this 3M's a great filter. It's too big to go underneath your face mask. If you're going to be wearing a face mask, you probably won't be using this one. But if you're just doing a crazy amount of sanding and you're just wearing safety glasses, this is a great unit. These are all replaceable, and you can add increased levels of filtration in a secondary cover. You can also buy different filtration types. So you can buy an organic vapor cartridge for this. And speaking of which, this would be my older organic vapor filter. This is if I'm spraying paints, things of that nature. And if you have a problem with the filters, let's say you have a lot of facial hair or just the size and shape or your comfort level, you can't seem to make any of these work. They keep leaking on you, air in, and you're still brand new filter. You can still smell the sawdust. There are other options. They're positive pressure options, and what they have is they have the filters either on top of the head or on your belt, and there's a pump. There's actually a pump that pulls the air in through the filter, and then it pumps it and provides a positive pressure inside a face mask. And that shower of air just pours all into the face mask. Positive pressure prevents any contaminants from going into the hood. Especially with people with beards and such, this is a great option. Okay, so, make sure you recognize that you need to get the right filter. As I've said, if you're going to have an oil mist contaminant in the air for whatever you're doing, if it's when you're working on the car or what have you, or if you're cleaning parts in your shop, you want to make sure that it's a R or a P on your filter, because that way you have resistance to oil. Now, if it gets exposed to oil, it's usually good for about 8 hours. But dry contaminants like just wood dust, your filters will be good for quite a while. They last. And there's other types of filters, like on this particular unit. There's organic vapor or acid gas. There's combinations, alkalins. So you just have to know what you're spraying. Remember the thing, one of the two rules. If you can smell it, you're breathing it, right? So one of the ways you know your respirator filter is not working is you smell the contaminant. The other thing you need to keep in mind is if it's really hard to breathe through the filter, you put it on, and after a few uses or hours, you're like, and you really seem to have to work at getting air through it, you need to stop. You need to take it off and replace it because it's clogged. And if it's hard to breathe, it's making your respiration and your heart work too hard, right? So, and that's a real hazard. Know your hazard. If you have any questions, consult either the company. The companies are always willing to give guidance as far as it. Consult your doctor. Make sure you talk to him if you have any health conditions about impact of wearing a filter on your breathing, what have you. And there's all kinds of resources online. Absolutely go see it. So with all this, we talked about everything. Which one's right for you? Well, go back to rule number one. It's got to be the one you use. It's got to be comfortable. Deal with the hazard that you want to deal with. All right. So if you're dealing with straight wood dust and there's no oil or chemicals involved, you want a filter that gives you an N95 protection. That way it will filter out the wood sawdust and protect you from getting it into your lungs and all the chemicals that might have been absorbed into that wood, finishes, what have you. It's usually the best place to start, and wear it, make it comfortable. This is a good filter, the RZ mask. It's great for underneath a mask. And most of the time, if I'm not under the mask, I'll probably wear this particular one. It's light, low profile. These are great options Again, you'll find the links down below, and make sure that whichever one you use, that is NIOSH certified. If it doesn't say NIOSH on it, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, it hasn't been tested to NIOSH standards. They may even say that it's NIOSH, it achieves NIOSH levels of filtration, but if it hasn't been tested, it won't have the NIOSH symbol on it. So make sure it says NIOSH. Don't waste your money. Amazon has a lot of options on it. A lot say protection up to NIOSH level 9 and 95, and that's by analysis and comparison, not by testing. So if you're going to use this at work, most locations of employment will require it be NIOSH marked. There, we put a lot of information into this video, right? Like I said, like this video and save it. If you need to come back, if you're not sure, well, what type respirator did he say? It's got to be what level? This is the one video that has that information. If you want to do the research on your own, again, go down in the description. There's a lot of links. If you found this information useful, the thumb, click that thumb, and the subscribe button with that bell down there. I think it's down there. That way you get notified each week of all of our content. Really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and we will see you in the next video. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.